Thank you very much. Awesome. So there's going to be essentially kind of two different sides to my chat. So I'd like to, in general, start kind of from foundation concepts. So the kind of the logical explanation for things. And so I'll be going a little bit over some of my thoughts about security operations, engineering, automation, how we do things in security. And then towards the end, what I'll do is I will flip to a bit of a demo of what some of those concepts kind of can look like. And hopefully the demo gods will shine upon me today. So briefly, myself, so I'm Max, co-founder of LimaCharlie. My background is from a few different places. So Canadian intelligence, and then I worked for Google for a while, early Crowdstrike. So kind of from a bunch of different types of organizations, sometimes from a couple of small organizations all the way to some pretty big organizations like Google and the government. All right. So the thesis, essentially, that I want to talk about is the following. So we are confusing high-level desires with product. So there's a lot of things that we want to do in security, and we have been kind of going through this process of realizing that we want to do those things. And when I say we, I mean this whole security industry for the past, I don't know, let's say 30 years to be generous. And this cycle, at every point of this cycle, we would realize that we wanted to do something, that we needed to do something. And then what we would do is that we would come up with a new individual standalone kind of like concept or product or category. But this is fundamentally a cycle that we have to break. As you might have heard me talk about this before, but there's only so many products, so many units of things that we can onboard in an organization or think about or reason about or keep in our brain about how they work. So here's an example, one of many examples. So I want to be able to automate and orchestrate. So that's, I would say, a couple years back, maybe between 5-10 years ago, that this concept kind of started coming out, right? As soon as we went from, I have a couple of firewalls, and then we started saying, well, I have a lot of different things in my infrastructure. So the SOAR concept was born. And as soon as it happened, it meant that new products were born along with it, right? So we saw that one need, and we expanded it with a very standalone specific concept. So what that meant is that the SecOps teams now had to do a bunch of different things for this new kind of nugget of value, new things we wanted to do. So we had to buy a new product, potentially from a new company, from a new vendor. We had to kind of onboard that new vendor. That's just the sort of the tip of the iceberg. We had to learn and integrate that new product. So like the previous talks, there's now a bunch of products that make that a lot easier, but there's still kind of a concept around how does this product work? What's its vision of the world? And I'll get back to that. And then we had to interface with the worldview between that new product and every other product that we're using as a security operations team. So things that have kind of gone in that direction. So you kind of pick your terms in the industry that are really understood today. So like data lakes, SOAR, SIM, EDR, maybe CSPM. I don't know. Like inventory management, and so on and so on. And the core idea here is that we can't go on forever and just add more and more, and we should not. And I think that there's ways that we can get out of that, but that require effort. So, put in a kind of a graphical form, this is how I think about it, right? for us to get to the I want to do something about something in security operations, right? So it might be I want to automate things, or I want to do compliance, or I want to alert on this thing, or I want to, name it. Look at IAM. We have to go through that whole pyramid. And so I mentioned, the capacity planning, the due diligence, all the things about onboarding a new product, maintenance, APIs, the world view, which is really important because there's a lot of products that see the world in a drastically different way than others, right? If you have an EDR, even in the same category, you might be dealing, let's say, with like EDRs, or you're dealing with different SIMs. They have entirely different ways of doing things and of conceptualizing what's a SIM. That in of itself is a big question. So what that means is that I want to do a bunch of those things means that I have, one pyramid for each of those things, and that makes me very, very, very sad. As I'm sure anybody that has been doing this for a while. It's time to re-architect is the idea. So we have learned a ton about different categories. So about things that we do in cybersecurity, right? I think most people here either work with or have onboarded or have built even things like SIMs, or name your category. But I think if we were to do a poll around those things, most people would be able to identify what they get from those, from those things, right? So over the years, what you want out of a SIM, what you want out of a SOAR. So we've done a ton of learning there. And we want to add more of these things. And we need to add more of these things, right, that come up all the time. Things that, like CSPM is a good example, right? 10 years ago, like CSPM did not exist. And we need to be able to keep adding those on to our security operations, to our SOCs, to our teams. How do we do that without just accumulating more and more and more debt? And, sorry about that. So, yeah, the foundation is that we have to rethink about how we want to go and build the security operations. So how can we do that? Well, one approach, which I like to call the Pokemon approach, which is I'm a big company, you got to collect them all, so I'm just going to buy 20 companies every year. I'm going to make a nice web portal. I'm going to skin all of those products together, slap them under that portal, and say, like, yes, good, we've optimized things. And that's not a lie. Like, part of that pyramid has been optimized. But it's also, I pretty strongly believe, the wrong way, but faster. So how else can we do that? Or, yes, that's right. So to go into that pyramid, what have we done? Yes, we have optimized things. Like, things are better. We've eliminated probably a lot of maintenance because that vendor probably maintains kind of all of those products, like kind of a lot of the core infrastructure. We've eliminated the requirement to go and onboard new vendors. That's great. But there's still a lot of the pyramid that I don't really like having there. So what we need. Here's the kind of the core values that we need. So we need to deconstruct the requirements. It kind of going back to the thesis, right? We understand well the value of all of these things. Let's start to abstract away those categories, right? Let's try to abstract away SOAR or SIM and think in terms of very practical requirements of how you want to be able to run security operations or a SOC. We all understand this. So identified real value of category X. I'm going to call them primitives just because naming is very difficult and I don't have a lot of imagination. Define where those requirements can live. So for us to get to the point where we're only tackling the top of that value pyramid, it means that we need some kind of neutral ground. So we need some kind of space where we're able to do things and work together that operates within the same worldview, within the same APIs. So that understands well each other, but that is neutral. So core shared concepts. There's a ton of things that we do in security that are not rocket science. They're so well understood nowadays that all we really need is to have a neutral ground and define those concepts. And I'm not really referring to, taking 20 different companies and building a brand new things, but really kind of defining a lot of the core ground in a single neutral ground. Primitives as APIs. So that's the other thing that's needed. We don't want to be building things for humans. We need to be building things for computers. If we are building our SOC targeting humans as like that first layer of consumers of that SOC, of the security infrastructure, we're just going to lose. So we need to be able to, in that neutral ground with some shared concepts, have things available very, very openly as APIs and make it available. So making it available is, again, really important. We need to first join the 21st century. So if you cannot actually go and try and like play with the thing or build something with a new product, I think it's just a non-starter nowadays. So it needs to be something that is drastically accessible. API first, again, we're building things for machines, not the other way around. So we need to have things always available as APIs fundamentally. The neutral part, I come back to it because it needs to be a place where we can all build. If it's a walled garden, as in an app store kind of thing, so many limitations come off of that that it's really, really difficult to get people that are, from the student to the Fortune 100, prototyping, building things in that environment. If we just limit things to only Fortune 100 being able to build in that ecosystem, that's great, but we're just not sort of getting a lot of the innovation from the wider community. So all of these things that I'm kind of describing is really boiling down to a cloud provider for SecOps. And, obviously I think people here kind of get where I'm coming from this, but not a monolithic product, not an IT cloud provider, but somewhere between, specifically for security operations. So, like, spoiler, that's what we call the SecOps cloud platform. But beyond the name, beyond who, I think it's those criterias, it's this philosophy that is critical for us, again, us as in the security industry, to move towards the future so that we can go and we can expand and we can get better without getting stuck in the same tech debt over and over. So the idea is we get to that top of the pyramid. Example that is relevant actually here to the demo that I'll be doing. So, I want to hunt for SUID binaries. Apologies if it goes a little bit over some folks. It's pretty down in the weeds, but I want to schedule different hunts in my infrastructure. I want to do alerting on Office 365. I want to do compliance around what I do. So all of those requirements should be able to coexist together in that neutral space where we don't have to build an entire new product and that whole pyramid over and over again. All right, I will get into the demo and let's see how it goes. So here what I mean is I'll be showing a bunch of different things and really just showing doing a thing. And the question becomes, okay, show me the SIM, show me the SOAR, show me the, name your category. And, the answer is it's really kind of there and kind of not there, which is my entire point. So let's see. What you will see in a second is, so very much a live demo. I'm going to throw up 100 instances in the cloud in a big beefy machine of Linux containers, Linux because it's easier, and not 1,000 because apparently there's some really weird limits when you get to really high container accounts trying to connect to the internet. So I'm going to keep it simple. And those machines are going to be connecting into our SecOps Cloud platform. They will be leveraging automation engine, so automation that happens in that environment. They will be, this will be then talking to our Velociraptor extension. So everything on the left side is sort of external. Everything on the right side is also external. That middle is essentially that neutral ground, that environment where we do things. So extensions could be built by anybody. In this case, we built one. It's our new Velociraptor extension. So it's going to go and deploy Velociraptor on 100 endpoints, and it's going to go and run artifact collection for the Linux SUID binaries. So without going into full details, SUID binaries, right, is sort of looking for binaries that have a specific permission that allows them to potentially be used by attackers, depending on how the permission sets are done and all that stuff. If you run a big Linux environment, you probably should have some flavor of that. This is going to come back into artifact storage. Again, artifacts is sort of, for us, one of those core concepts where we say, like, it's a thing. The Velociraptor extension is going to say, hey, I know what this is, and it's going to convert it into direct telemetry into LimaCharlie, where we will do alerting based on the SUID. And all of this we're going to schedule. So we're going to say, like, I want to schedule this over to run every day. The Office 365 actually removed just because it was just I figured I'd run out of time. But just to kind of like prove the point, that this is very endpoint centric, but really we're talking about all the things. So let me try this for 1 second. All right. Okay. So first things first, I'm just going to make a tenant. So this is our own little sandbox in that neutral ground environment. So this is going to take just a couple of seconds. And then what we'll do is we will use some infrastructure as code, and we're going to deploy the things that I mentioned. There we go. Oh. Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to give us some headroom because we're talking about bringing in about 100 endpoints. Well, I just need to do this. So let's give us some headroom of okay. So let's go. Don't worry, there are creds in there. They will be cycled after this call. I just wanted to kind of keep it simple. So very basic, what you're seeing here is we're creating installation key, a bunch of little things. Oh yeah, we're going to be sending the results from our Velociraptor hunt in real time into BigQuery, where we can run arbitrary SQL over those results. So here, I'm just sending things in BigQuery, applying some transformation over the data, simplifying it a little bit. Here I have a detection rule where I'm looking for all the known binaries that have SUIDs that I'm expecting, and I'm saying if it's not in there, give us an alert. I've got my schedule here. Every 24 hours, I want to run this particular hunt. And so all I'm going to do, get my cursor. There we go. Let's go. Yep, I'm ready to do all these things. Alrighty, almost there. So next I will just grab a quick installation key, copy it into my script that onboards those machines. So 1 second. Alrighty, so let's go back. Here we go. So we're going to start seeing sensors come in a couple of seconds. Just going to I hope I did not mess up the demo. One second. All right, here we go. There we go. Okay. Just took a second. We've got our 100 sensors, so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to wait for a day. I'm just going Velociraptor, and I'm looking for linux.sys.suid. I want to run this on all Linux. All right, let's go. There we go. The collection has started on 100 endpoints. And if I go here, I can watch it come in live. There we go. So we are seeing a bunch of collections happening, should be accelerating. There we go. So things are coming in. Very cool. If I am to pick one, we can see that all our collection is coming in already. And then I can just go in my BigQuery instance and just run my search to get the number of unique endpoints where I've seen the various binaries. So really what I wanted to show here was this mix of different types of logic, different types of solutions, right? We are not associated with Velociraptor at all. And so we have this neutral ground where we're able to take in and use what Velociraptor is building. Somebody could be building, some kind of automation for a SOC, or they could be building around like a product. But the idea is that even a student can come in and build something that we have never thought about. As a SOC, the value is that you're able to start deboarding, in a way, some of those concepts that you keep accumulating, right? So to be able to say, hey, I don't need necessarily this one product. What I need is the couple of features within it that are actually useful in automating things, and to be able to expand that environment. So that is really the core of what the message that I wanted to communicate is we need to rethink about how we're building our security operations. I also should note that there's a star, I think, on one of my early slides that this is This is obviously not consumer grade. I sometimes get, the question, like when we talk about stuff like, this is not an approach that, the hair salon is going to be using, obviously. But I think if you're building a security operations program, that's how we have to be starting to think about what are the pieces that are differentiating and what are the pieces that are not, and then just invest as much as we can in being able to blow up the scope of what we as a community can build that works together without just more products that kind of get in the way and are costly. So that's it. I don't know if there's any questions. Sure.
So, for example, I saw you deploy the sensors. Is that what we call the same thing as an agent that goes on an endpoint?
Yes. So in that particular case, this was there's sort of like no fakery anywhere in between. It is the creation of a tenant and then the deployment of Linux EDRs, Linux agents on hosts. It happens that those are kind of fake because they're all running on one box in a container, but it's 100% the same.
What happens in a case where? So what happens in a case where you have devices that you cannot install the agent on them? How are they being monitored?
So that's a great question, and I think that's one of those things that are critical for an environment like a neutral environment like that to work. Is this was very, let's say, endpoint centric, and it kind of called out the Office 365, right? That's a great example of Office 365 is not an endpoint. It's kind of this weird concept. Not weird. It's not actually weird, but like it's totally different. And the commonality between all of those things that we've identified is telemetry. So both of these things generate telemetry. And at the end of the day, whether I'm trying to alert on something happening on an endpoint or Office 365, or I've got a webhook and a custom app in-house for our custom app that's sending data to it, if I want to automate some kind of thing over it, you're trying to automate over detection. And so that's why we really focus on those primitives and those kind of like base layers that across the board allow us to go and say, whether it's a thing we know about or a thing we don't know about, or an EDR or a thing in the cloud or firewall logs, it doesn't matter. The commonality is telemetry.
Okay, so for example, it could be a telemetry coming from an IoT device or OT device as well. And what about the protocol? Does the protocol have any impact here?
So I'm gonna quote our friend from Tynes here. JSON is pretty much mostly won the war at this point. So he is our friend. So that's what we've decided to standardize on. Fundamentally, as long as there's some kind of JSON representation, that is our internal representation. But the idea is, again, thinking about the philosophy of this, right, is that we make everything coming in and everything going out extremely aggressively open, right? So we are not saying, hey, this is the one way that, things come into, in this case, LimaCharlie, but rather we're saying, look, as long as it's telemetry, here's 50 different ways of bringing data into LimaCharlie from different open technologies, whether it's on Azure or S3 or on-prem or whatever it is. It's this idea that everything should be able to connect into it, and it should be able to connect into everything else. Again, at the output side of things, that means whatever cloud provider or on-prem or going into other solutions like Tynes, where we have great integrations with Tynes to kind of run through playbooks, but fundamentally it's kind of a generic approach. Sure thing. Oh.
So it just seems like you're taking a very process-centric approach to this, right? What frameworks have you seen SOCs use to break the to understand the processes they want to implement within LimaCharlie, right? And like how efficient is that, and how quickly can they get started with that?
Interesting question. So The last part of that question is really simple in the sense that it tends to be really simple. Like once you've figured out what you want to do, like you've gone down to the fundamentals, it's generally speaking super easy to do because of the generic approach, right? That first part is kind of the interesting bit of that question. And I would say that it will vary. It'll vary a lot, right? It depends on the type of process and the type of team. Certainly, if you are in a team that is extremely tool focused, that's sort of the first thing that we have to go and scratch the surface to understand the requirement. But some teams are totally the opposite of that, right? And like we talked to a lot of people, actually, like Velociraptor and like OpenSearch users, right, tend to be pretty tool agnostic outside of these things. And so in those cases, it's pretty easy for us to chat about how that works and then about what the process works and how to kind of translate it into LimaCharlie land. A lot of the things that exist in LimaCharlie, but I would kind of call it out as a generic term, like around the SecOps cloud platform, is that a lot of what we're doing maps very much to cloud providers, right? The way that we're doing things. So we don't have like a bucket of data like a cloud provider like Azure does. However, if you kind of look at the requirements or what is Lambda or cloud functions, and you really kind of think about the use cases and how somebody in IT or building an app kind of translates those, they translate really well because it's a very similar approach, just tailored to security operations. And I would argue that is exactly why that's the future, because we have this whole industry that has paved the way to figure out the lessons, figure out that the Git flows are actually really important, right? And to building things at scale. And so as the industry grows, it's got to go in that direction.
Any other questions for Max? All right.
All right. Thank you.